Welcome to Behind the Scenes with Santa and Mrs. Claus. And once again, obviously it's just Mrs. Claus, not Santa Claus. First of all, I want to apologize. I am a day late in doing the podcast, but I think as you will see, we have had just a really rough time since I did our last podcast in November. So, as I told you, we had gone to Houston, and Santa was being the Santa for Bass Pro. Um, he had in the house where we were living had taken a bit of a fall and had injured his foot, his toe. We didn't really know that at the time, but a couple of days later, uh, he looked at his foot and said, "Oh boy, that looks like it's infected." So I looked at it, and sure enough, and I said, "Well," I said, you're almost, you're all ready to go to work." So I said, when you get off, we'll, go to the emergency room and have them take a look at it, which is what we did. So that was, let's see, that was December 17th, I think. And so the emergency doctor looked at it and said, "Oh," he said, "you really got a bad infection." And he said, "I think you need to go." Actually, let me back up a little bit. We were actually in a satellite. It wasn't in a hospital. So he said, "I think you really need to go to the hospital." So he um, went ahead and went to a hospital there in Houston. And they did some tests, and it appeared that actually the reason for this really bad infection was that there was very little blood flow going down his right leg. And so they scheduled him for some tests, for some ultrasounds and things like that. And it turned out that was a confirmation that indeed he had very little blood flow going down his right leg. His left leg was good, but his right leg wasn't. So they wanted to do vascular surgery, and they had a excuse me, a team of doctors there in Houston, and that actually serviced, I think Joe told me, like 7 hospitals. So he actually happened to go in on a Thursday, and they did their surgeries on Thursdays. So anyway, he ended up being in the hospital a week before they could even schedule him for this surgery. So, and then the surgery, and of course, as you can imagine, that was, let me back up a little bit again. That was very scary for both of us. I mean, there he's in a hospital, with physicians that we don't know anything about. I'm obviously in this house with, again, nobody to call, nobody to talk to. We're really kind of, stranded on our own, and a very, very scary and comfortable position to be in, because we were 2 days drive from our house. So it was a long, long week. And of course they didn't want, Joe was in bed. They didn't want him to walk around a lot because he didn't have the blood flow, and so he kind of was almost claustrophobic there in his hospital room. And then they were talking back and forth about how serious the infection was in his foot. And so anyway, they said, well, this vascular operation usually takes about an hour. Well, that hour turned into 5.5 hours, and he had to have 5 stents in his leg, and he also had 2 angioplasties done on the leg. So far more serious and far more involved than obviously we had initially thought or even contemplated. Um, anyway, this was the surgery was actually finally performed Christmas Eve, and they knew we were trying to get back to Alabama because for one thing, our stay at the house was coming to an end, and obviously we just simply wanted to get home. So he was released from the hospital that same day, that in the afternoon, and just kind of they didn't give us a whole lot of do this, do that. The only thing they said to him was just, you can't bend over and you can't lift anything over 10 pounds. So that kind of made that, when we were packing up, uh, then I had to really pack everything up, uh, take it out to the garage, and then Joe helped kind of oversee everything because he was the one that was back in the car, and he did such a wonderful job that I said, well, you got to kind of help me, tell me where you think things should go and where we can push them and shove them and get out of here. So, that Thursday afternoon when he came back, we did a little bit, and then got up Christmas morning and just packed. Finally, about 1:30, I guess it was, we finally had everything together. We're able to put the cats, of course, remember, we were traveling with our cats, yes. We're able to put them in the carrier and put them in the car, and off we went. Um, and he was told he could drive. Of course, I don't know whether they really realized that it was a 2-day drive that we were contemplating. In any event, off we went, and on Christmas, and we got as far as Lafayette, Louisiana, and then which was about, I guess, about um, 300, 250, 300 miles from Houston, and getting dark, and so we decided, okay, this was about as far as we could go, and stayed the night. And Joe started to have some real problems with his leg. It started to swell and was painful, and again, none of this stuff was really explained to us, but of course, also at this point, we're not exactly halfway home, but we're certainly not going to turn around and go back to Houston. So the next day, we again gathered up our stuff and just said, if we can at all manage to get home, then that's what we're going to do. It was about an 8-hour drive. I think it took us 9. And a lot of crazy drivers. Actually, Christmas wasn't too bad, although Joe was driving at this point in time, and there was a truck that just sideswiped us, and he missed us by inches. I mean, I looked out the window, and all I could see was the truck. And I don't even know how Joe managed to get the car over its way. I don't know. I think God was definitely, our co-pilot that whole trip. And then the 26th was, and again, all this happened under poor Joe's driving. A lot of people just not paying attention. I don't know whether they were, texting or talking or not paying attention. It was drifting in and out of lanes, and it really was a nightmarish drive. I mean, we just didn't know if we were even going to get home, and again, I have to say that definitely, God was our co-pilot on that, because it was a terrible, terrible drive. So anyhow, we got home on December 26th, about 6:30, and needless to say, we were exhausted. By that time, Joe's whole leg had swollen. It almost looked like a tree trunk. Um, and unfortunately, because the surgeons were in Texas, we had nobody to call to say, is this, what is this normal after vascular surgery on the leg? we looked things up on the internet, and they did say that, there was leg swelling, and it seemed to be maybe normal, and um, the pain in the leg was, I said, well, yeah, you're going to have some pain there. So we thought, well, all right. Um, and of course, Joe was exhausted, and I was tired, and of course, again, he couldn't do anything to help, so I, had to do the unpacking and everything, try and get all the stuff that we took back in the house and go shopping because we'd been gone 2 months, so we had no, you know, everyday kind of food in the house. Um, so anyway, um, that was the 26th, and then we went. I guess it was about a week, 2 weeks, I think. And I looked at and I was supposed to monitor his foot, change the dressing on this infection. And I finally said to Joe, I said, this just doesn't look right. Your foot's swelling. It doesn't look quite right to me. I think we have an issue. Um, so went actually to our local hospital emergency room, and they basically said, "Oh, we can't help you. You're going to need to go to Huntsville to a vascular surgeon," which we did have. Joe had a previous surgery, so we did have a doctor to call, although we found out that he retired. So the doctor that the next online said, "Oh, well, I'll see you maybe Thursday, and then I want a consultation, and then I'll look at your foot and see what's what." And we're like, "Well, no, that's not going to work." And even the nurse in the office said, "Well, if you're really concerned, go to Huntsville Hospital in the emergency room. We have another vascular surgeon there, and maybe they can look at it." So we said, okay. So we went in about 11 o'clock, and I think it was about 5 or 6 hours later, we finally had a consultation with a physician. And they actually had taken Joe in for an X-ray and another ultrasound. And it's funny because we said, Joseph, I don't know why they're doing an ultrasound. He said, I'm not going in because of my leg, and that surgery's already been done. So he said, I don't even know why they're wasting their time. And I said, well, yeah. I said, that seems kind of stupid. And of course, the night before we had been in our local hospital. That was also for 6 hours before we got discharged there. So anyway, they called us in, and of course we're talking about the infection in his foot, and the doctor said, "Well, yeah, that's okay." He still didn't seem to be concerned with that or think there was an infection. But he said, no, he said, "I want to talk about the fact that you have a blood clot in your leg." And we're like, what? Okay, so that's pretty serious when you hear that. That's, of course, can be untreated, obviously, a life-threatening problem. And so we said, we have to take care of that. And he said, so you will be admitted to the hospital. We have to give you blood thinners. We have to, do more tests and different things to, ascertain exactly what's going on. So that was a real shock, and I was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. The good news is we're home, so at least that was good. And we had some of the doctors, which we at least knew knew their little bit more about them. So yeah, so he that was when was that? Let me think. It all blurs together, It So that was on the 5th, just the 5th. He went into the hospital on Monday. And so then we did see a vascular surgeon in addition to that, and she came in and said, "Oh yeah," she said, "You've got a bad infection. We definitely have to there has to be a little surgery for, to take care of that infection." And then he was, of course, on antibiotics, and they had pretty much 2 IVs going at all the time. Because apparently you couldn't mix the 2 drugs together, so he had one on one arm, one on the other arm, in addition to all the other things and tests and taking blood, and any time you go to the hospital, it's just, well, you certainly don't get any rest. And so he actually was discharged Thursday night, and so he is home. He, though, actually was released with an IV, and we had a nurse come out on Friday, and I had to learn how to administer the antibiotic because he's getting that via the IV. So that's been a real learning experience, and also again taking care of the wound infection, and she had to do some stitches there, so he has to go back in a couple of weeks for that. Needless to say, we have just been through the ringer. I mean, unfortunately, obviously, he was not able to finish out the Santa season. We lost a week on that with to be honest, much needed income. That's one of the reasons that we do that. That's a huge boost to our yearly income when we do that. And of course now we've been incurring in all these medical costs. So it's just been really, really tough for us. Really, since the 17th of December, we just have been on a up and down, and yes, it's okay, no, it's not, and just every time you think you turn around and boom, something else, hits you in the face. So I know this isn't our usual happy podcast, but I wanted to let everybody know as to why you're seeing just me again, why I'm late with the podcast, and the fact that we're just struggling a bit right now. If you want to know what you might be able to do for us, I would, we would really appreciate it if buy books. You could go to our website, thenorthpolepress.com. As you know, we have a lot of books, and that would really help us out. It would, and it's, to me, that's more of a win-win. You would come away with a really nice book or books to either for yourself or a nice gift to give away, and then we would get the royalties for that. So that would be a big boon to us if you feel that you'd like to help us out in that manner. That would be very, very much appreciated. And then, just good hope and thoughts and prayers to send our way would also be very, very much appreciated. Certainly my hope is by February 10th, we will both be here to do the podcast, and we will have a much more uplifting podcast to do. We have a lot of plans for our books and such this year, so we're just going to be a bit delayed in doing it, and have to rethink some of the things that we were going to do that I think now we're maybe not going to be able to do. So yeah, that's it. Again, that's the whole story, and again, as always, we appreciate your subscribing to us and listening to us and sending us good thoughts this time is something that we really, really both could use. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again next month on February 10th.